Hello, I am Lisa McLauchlan, DMA Regional Talent Manager in Scotland. I'm delighted to introduce Kieran Healey-Ryder. Kieran is Head of Whisky Discovery, Communications and Corporate Relations at Glasgow-based award-winning whisky makers Whyte Mackay. So this year, Whyte Mackay have set the Talent Marketing Challenge 22 live brief. Kieran, you and Whyte Mackay have supported DMA on several of our programmes. Why is this important to you, to the Whyte Mackay brand, and also the DMA marketing?
I think the DMA is an organisation that really has a number of programs that are supporting professionals that are already working in the industry, but also folks that are new to industry. And I've worked with the DMA for a number of years. For us at Whyte Mackay, we're really looking for an opportunity to work a bit more closely together and actually to help solve some bigger problems that we are facing. And we're a small company, we're in a small country, we have a really committed set of internal colleagues that are also looking at these problems. We wanted to work with the DMA to think about what other ways are there to solve the issues that we as a whisky brand and whisky maker face. And I think the benefit of working with the DMA is it challenges your thinking. It gives you a different perspective. You know, Lisa, you work with 100 different organizations in different categories. I'm here in a whisky business, and I think between us, we come to a different perspective. And I think ultimately on the project, it's about arriving at a useful, insightful perspective using data to inform our thinking.
So Kieran, please can you tell us a little bit more about the brief that you set for this year's marketing challenge?
As a whisky maker in Scotland, we're fortunate in that we're surrounded by other whisky makers with other fantastic whiskies. So for us, we're constantly challenging ourselves to think about what's the best way to stand out and how do we inspire consumers to discover and taste our whisky over our competitors. And we're really interested in the notion of flavour. We fundamentally believe that whisky is a category, it's an alcohol brand where you can discover a whole world of flavour. And so flavour is an interesting territory for us to explore, but we're thinking about how do we do that in an interesting way, in a way that helps us harness data and start to build a relationship with consumers over time. And how do we talk about flavour and bring it to life when they may not be drinking the whisky, where they may be new to whisky, where perhaps they have a preconception of what whisky is that isn't really born by the category today. What we know in Scotland is that whisky is vibrant, fun, youthful. It's a drink that often when you ask people, where did you have your first whisky? They'll tell you about the time in intimate detail because it will be with friends, or it will be with your father or your mother, or with your girlfriend or your wife or your partner. And there are so many rich stories around how people discover whisky for the first time. We're interested in how do we use flavour as a way to take that conversation and encourage folks to explore what we fundamentally think is a brilliant drink. So the pitch comes from that perspective. How do we use flavour? We want to understand the role of data in that. We want to understand the stretch. So how do you bring that idea to life in an interesting way? And at the heart of it, we really want a creative thought, something that says, cognizant of the context and the category and what we know about consumers, this is a creative thought that brings that to life in an interesting way that's connected back to who you are as Whyte Mackay. So it's a big task, but hopefully a really fun and interesting task. It's certainly something that we're spending a lot of time here thinking about. So we're looking forward to see what our DMA teams come back with.
What is the silver bullet you're actually looking for the students to deliver in their proposal and video presentation?
The guidance I give to folks that are entering competitions like this is, regardless of the data or the slides or the presentation, it's focus on the story. We need to understand what the thought process is that's gone into the recommendation you're making. So don't just start with the solution. Think about how you take us on a journey that helps share your thinking in a short space of time. So you may have spent hours and days thinking it through. You may be thinking about it on your run in the evening or taking your kids to nursery in the morning. Whatever the context is, you'll have spent hours thinking about this challenge. You need to boil that down. So really focus on the story, because the silver bullet for us could be many different things, but providing the solid story exists, we'll be there with you listening to what you have to recommend.
Thank you, brilliant, thank you. And Kieran, during your marketing career, you've been through a lot of pitches. What advice have you got for final shortlisters who will be pitching their ideas to you?
This is possibly the most difficult question I've been asked in the last 2 years because, and I'm sure it's the same for you, Lisa, but when you give advice, and sometimes it's invited or not, when you give advice, you're basing it on 18 years or so pre-pandemic. And actually what you would have said pre-pandemic may or may not be accurate post-pandemic. So I think the most important thing is to enjoy it. You probably need to slow down more than you would slow down when you're communicating online than you would in real life. You probably need to take a moment internally to think, have you got this right? You also need to think about who we are as Whyte Mackay and think about the context, because it's such a competitive category and because it's such a historic category in itself, as such a historic brand and product. There is potentially over 100 years worth of marketing effort that's gone before you. You can't be expected to know all of the marketing lessons that have been learnt in 100 years. But think about the context. We are small, but we hope we are mighty. We are agile because we are small and we think fast. We have brands that are, we hope, really very distinctive, and some of them are behind me today. So think about the context. It's not, think about who we are as our brands, but most importantly, have fun. Because if you're having fun and if you're excited by your idea, then we will be too.
Brilliant advice, thank you. And can you explain why this brief is such a fantastic fit for this young student audience as well?
So to explain why this brief is such a fantastic fit for a student audience, it takes time to find your feet in your career. Now, it takes time. Once you finish your degree, if that's the route you've come, or your postgrad, or perhaps you haven't gone to university, when you start out in work, it's about orientating yourself, finding the work that you enjoy. The drinks category, regardless of whether it's whiskey or wine or beer or cider, it's an exciting category to be. We're fundamentally an entertainment orientated category. So we're giving you guys an opportunity to think about, what is it to entertain consumers through your product? What is it to bring consumers together to enjoy that shared moment? So it should be fun. But it's also something that allows you to look at a relatively small company that ordinarily we don't have a large intern program. We do have one. We don't have a large graduate program. We do have some. This is an opportunity for folks to really think about, would they like to have a career within the drinks industry, which is vibrant. Single malt whiskey is a huge economic contributor to the UK, to Scotland in particular. Scotland is an absolutely phenomenal place to do marketing. I've been fortunate to have 2 stints in Scotland and very much feel at home here in Glasgow. We do phenomenal things, whether you look at Slaters from a tailoring perspective, or Edinburgh Festival, or Edinburgh Zoo, or whether you're looking at Iron Brew or salmon or whiskey. There's fantastic marketing going on in Scotland, and actually I would go so far as to say is probably some of the best marketing going on in the world going on in Scotland. Because of the nature, we're small, we have a small audience, we have about 6 million people here. So brands have to really fight to cut through. We have to fight to win that consumer. And it challenges our ingenuity, it challenges our creativity. Unfortunately, they're 2 things that Scotland is traditionally really good at. So have fun with it. It's a great opportunity to understand what it is to market Scotland's national spirit, something that wherever you go in the world, if you say Scotland, Scotch whisky is probably one of the things that they associate with us. Possibly more recently, also the TV box set Succession, but single malt whisky should be right up there. So it's a good opportunity to do that. And we hope we are advocating for what a great industry single malt is to work in. We're really proud of the brands we have, but we're also not precious enough to say that you guys might not have thought something that we haven't thought of. So it's an open forum. We're really welcoming of your ideas, and hopefully it gives you a sense of what it is to work in Scotch.
Brilliant pitch there for Scotland. Thank you, Kieran. We've talked quite a lot about the whisky show as we've been putting this brief together, Kieran. Why do you do it, and can you explain why a creative and innovative approach is essential to attract people to your stand at the actual show?
This is such a great question for me personally, as someone that's come from an events marketing background with Edinburgh festivals and now working in a more digital environment. When we talk about marketing, it's very easy to feel that digital is a panacea or it's a total solution and you just need to do digital. What we believe is that digital is only effective if you have the offline working beautifully with the online. The Whisky Show is so important to the history of our business. It's where we launched one of our most famous whiskies, the Dalmore Trinitas. And in the first year that it launched, we went there. We launched this amazing whiskey that was, very special, really special story. I think it was a 64-year-old whiskey. And we've been really close to them ever since. The Whisky Show is a part of a bigger e-commerce orientated business. It's a place where, it happened a few weeks ago. I think, Lisa, I spoke to you before and after it. There were people there that were new to whiskey, that were just exploring, but there were also people there that were serial investors at the top end of the category, collecting these big collections, looking at McLauchlan, looking at Balvenie, looking at the Dalmore, and there was everything in between. So the Whisky Show is really a microcosm of the bigger whiskey industry worldwide. It's important for digital marketing because it's a fantastic opportunity. If you get those guys into your product, if you persuade them that it's a brand that they want to know more about, you have a chance to sample your product. And we know that liquid on lips, that trial experience is really important. And then you can stitch that together with a more integrated CRM or digital approach. It's fundamentally important. The other side of it is London may be the first whisky show, but actually there are whisky shows in the capital cities and the whisky hubs around the world. So it's one of about 30 really important international whisky shows that most whisky brands take part in. In the new world, it's about how do you engage with the consumer offline, give them that first experience of your brand. And the challenge that we've set with you, Lisa, and the challenge that we all face within whisky marketing is how do you take that offline moment and build more of an online relationship with them. So that's why Whisky Show is important. It's important to us and it's important to whisky as a whole.
Thank you so much. And what innovative examples do you have from previous years? We've talked about bubbles, we've talked about various things over the last couple of months. Can you tell us more about how you get people to your stand?
I think the two obvious examples are the infamous Whyte Mackay whiskey bubbles. If you were early to the show, you would have found the head of communication on the floor trying to work out the right ratio of whiskey to peach flavoring to water to put into a bubble machine. And the reason we did that was to give a little bit of vibrancy on the stand, to stand out. It was a gimmick. It was something that stood out in a wall of typical trade show environment, really. There were a lot of really interesting stands, but we all have to work within our 2-meter square space. Whiskey bubbles are a great way for people to experience flavor in a different way. So the way that you interact with a bubble is obviously very different to how you might drink a dram of whiskey. The other example is to do with our island Jura. And we've done a number of things at a number of shows where we will invite consumers at the show to win a trip or to engage directly with somebody that's from the island. So at the London Whisky Show, and we were lucky to have Mark Bruce, who is our brand home manager on Jura. He's actually Australian via London. He took the job to move to Jura with his partner and his dog, not that much before the pandemic. So he's then spent 2 years, rather than welcoming thousands of guests to Jura to understand the island and the brand. It's a very small island. There's just one distillery there, one whiskey distillery there, one road, one pub, and about 212 people. So Mark bought into the dream, moved there, and actually has had the pandemic. So he's spent his time doing live sessions via Instagram and all around the world, bringing Jura to the world. So we managed to get him off the island to London to tell these stories about not just a whiskey, but what the life is and what the purpose is of our brand in the context of this tiny community. And what we really believe in is that that distillery exists to bring prosperity back to that tiny community of about 212 people. So whiskey bubbles with flavor in an interesting way, but also a human being to bring that story to life in an authentic way and be able to share the stories of what it is to make whiskey in a rural community in Scotland.
And what can the winning team look forward to at the marketing workshop at the Dalmore?
COVID permitting, we have a fantastic, very small boutique distillery home in the Highlands. It's nestled between some farmland and the Cromarty Firth. It's a beautiful place to be. And what we're looking to do in those sessions is to talk through some of the projects that we have coming up, share some of the learning program that we deliver internally. So you get a sense of how we structure our approach to digital at Whyte Mackay in context of Whisky, but also for you to hear experiences from some of our really seasoned people. I'm proud to work alongside two fellows of the Marketing Society and also the current chair of the Marketing Society in Scotland. We're hoping that at least one of those folk will join us, and just to share some experiences from their lives. We have folk that work with us that have lived lives in designing Lego or working in wine, working in tea, working in sports. So to share some of those stories and experiences and give the winning team an opportunity to ask us some questions. We will also have an opportunity to experience the Dalmore, which is, we're fortunate to say, a really successful single malt at the top end of the category. So we'll definitely be understanding a little bit more about what it is to make the Dalmore the exceptional whisky that it is today, as well as some good old marketing banter along the way as well.
Fantastic. And have you got any final snippets of insights that you can provide the students?
So in terms of insights, don't be beholden to what we do today. We may be doing things that have a specific need or reason or rationale, but don't be beholden to what we do today. Secondly, don't be afraid to look out with Scotch whisky. We may not see the inspiration for our next great idea within the category. It might come from another category. We know that consumers are not sat at home experiencing our product all day, every day. They live a life. So look at their life, look at other touch points and passion points as well. And thirdly, don't be afraid to investigate taste and flavour. There are lots of examples where that's being explored through food and drink, through writers, through academic research papers that you might well have access to through your university. So they'd be the three summary points. But before we finish, I just want to take the opportunity to thank you, Lisa, and to the DMA, because we really appreciate the work that it takes to pull this together. We really appreciate that. We know it takes a restless persistence to pull this together, and you've definitely done this, but also to thank the university partners as well, because by taking part in this program, we're a little bit closer to some new thinking. We really appreciate the time that it takes to put this in, and we hope that we get an opportunity to work with the DMA and the partners ongoing in the future.
Fantastic, thank you very much. And finally, I'm just really keen to know myself, what is your favourite whisky and why? What's the flavour that you seek out, Kieran?
So in terms of my flavour profile, I grew up on Jura. My best friend Paul introduced me to Jura, living down south actually. And Jura is a whisky that brought me into the category, and you find that's quite common. As I've grown up in my flavours and perhaps grown up in general, become a bit older, I'm definitely more exploring smokier styles, but I would say I'm a very big fan of sweeter whiskies. If I was to recommend a whisky within our portfolio, I would definitely start with a Jura 10-year-old if you're new to whisky. If you're not new to whisky and actually you understand it a wee bit better, there's a phenomenal whisky we produced recently called the Whisky Works King of Trees, which is a really interesting whisky to explore. But I think the ultimate thing is, whichever whisky you've tried, if you've not found your perfect whisky yet, it is almost certainly out there. So keep exploring, because it's an incredibly rich and diverse world of flavour to discover.
Okay, last question. What's been the impact of Whyte Mackay of the projects that we've worked on over the last 18 months?
So the two projects prior to this one, the work we did around the relationship between how consumers respond to a product and its rarity, scarcity, etc., that's definitely been an input into how we go about asking for consumer feedback. We live in a world where consumers get asked for feedback all the time, actually, so it's really important to do that effectively, because that's such an easy source of insight in the digital landscape, and unless you have a thought around how to do that in a respectful way to the consumer, you'll fail. And that project really helped us think about that. But I would say the most important discussion we've had has been the work we did around sustainability. And actually that came at a time when we were launching the Whyte Mackay Green Print, which is effectively a living, breathing document that documents our journey from where we are to what we believe will be a sustainable future for our whisky making. And what you'll find in that document is a sentiment around measurement. I was specifically talking about measurement because what we discovered through the project with the DMA, and actually some of the thought from the students themselves, is sustainability is actually easier than I think a lot of marketeers would have thought it is, because as marketeers, we're used to data being precious and needing to be purchased and coming from big, powerful data companies. And in sustainability, what we found with that project is that's just not the case. And actually, the data sources that are publicly available are very useful to inform how each of us go about making small changes towards becoming more sustainable. And I'm talking to you from Glasgow. We are the host city for COP26. The city is heaving ahead of the conference kicking off in just a couple of days. It feels really important to think that through working together, we've kind of demystified what it will take for us to solve sustainability purely from an energy perspective. It hasn't necessarily changed what the strategy says. It hasn't necessarily resulted in a specific action, but it's reinforced and helped us feel confident that there's no one solution to everything, particularly from an energy standpoint, which is what we were looking at, but it's going to take a little bit of each of the solutions for us to make it. And had we not had that time, certainly within the marketing sustainability work we're doing, we wouldn't have that insight. And it's really changed how we've approached solving energy and sustainability moving forward.
That is fantastic feedback, and it shows the value of the work that our members give to us and our young people that come into the industry, and gives them a massive boost to hear that feedback. That's fantastic. Thank you so much for your time today, Kieran. It's been phenomenal working with you and your team, and look forward to seeing you on pitch day.
Yes, thank you, Lisa.
Thank you. Bye-bye.